Strap that Terran down. I want his mind mapped before his heart stops beating. The command was barked in a guttural dialect by Research Executor Varuk, his second jaw clicking as he pointed toward the barely conscious figure suspended in a cradle of grav restraints. Lieutenant Varn Elric stirred at the edge of comprehension, arms slack, mouth cracked with dehydration. The lights above him flickered in rhythmic stabs, white bubble, unyielding, surgical. The air was pungent with sterilizing compounds that irritated the sinuses and burned faintly in the throat. A cold gel constricted his scalp as electrodes prickled across his skin. Varn had been drifting in escape protocol for 70 hours. His survey shuttle had suffered a failure near a rogue moon tagged only as D422, power rerouted to life support, distress beacon fired. Then, contact. The Shalith Dominion, renowned for posturing neutrality, had intercepted him. He recalled the approach, a sleek vessel, black-veined and smooth, reflecting nothing. He remembered the greeting, suave tones, false kindness, offered hydration and medical assistance. Now, he couldn't feel his legs. Corsus, the dampening array isn't holding. He's starting to surface, Varuk snarled. Reinforce layers 4 and 5, scramble memory lanes tied to pre-conflict navigation. We need access to the Terran command syntaxes. The machinery around Elric thrummed with a deliberate cadence. He blinked rapidly, but every movement felt heavy, like dragging chains across wet concrete. His throat cracked as he spoke. This isn't a rest. Varuk turned, surprised the human could form words. No, Terran. This is reclamation. You belong to the Dominion now. A flash of pain stabbed through Elric's skull. Needles, fine as fibers, pierced into the neural cradle behind his ears. His spine locked. Somewhere above, projectors traced Terran fleet hierarchies based on extracted signals. They weren't just harvesting memories. They were mimicking command responses, inserting Dominion logic into Terran tactical flowcharts. High Vizier Krenthar watched through a containment viewport in the adjoining observatory, arms folded behind his elaborate deep silk robe. His tone with the attending strategists was composed, indifferent. We neutralized Delcaran interference by reshaping their myths. We'll consume Earth through their own patterns, use the Terran's neural core to simulate their aggression thresholds and distribution paths, build predictive overlays, then flood their border colonies with false crisis signals. But what if the Terrans trace this act? One of the advisors asked, his chitinous plates shifting nervously. This could be an opportunity, Krenthar interrupted. Earth reacts emotionally. They'll condemn us in their little councils, maybe cut off a trade note or two. Meanwhile, we've already disassembled their colonial expansion plan. A terminal beeped. The body on the table went rigid, then still. Varn Elric's neural network had finished its involuntary purge. The extraction was complete. A gel-laced containment capsule slid from beneath the operating table, the Terran's ruined cerebral core suspended in coolant, flashing data every 20 seconds. Seal it, said Varuk. Mark it as cooperative casualty. Include fabricated distress logs. We'll return it as a diplomatic courtesy. The Directorate Council of Earth convened beneath the geodesic arc of the inner spire, clouds scraping against its ridgeline above the Pacific Rim. Admiral Corvin Rask stood with arms clasped behind his back, his features hardened beyond mourning. The containment capsule rested on a steel platform before them, faint condensation gathering around the rim. No one approached it. Was there any trace of resistance? Asked Director Hulvek, his voice low, unsteady. No. No signs of physical conflict. His systems were intact. And yet his synaptic lattice was overridden, replied Dr. Gerald Voss, head of Neurointel. Deliberately, not erased, repurposed. They used him like an encryption scaffold. This is not an act of desperation. This is long-range structural sabotage. Counselor Bran Thole rose from his seat, fists trembling. They used him as a weapon against us, and sent him back like a rapt threat. A long pause. No one filled the space. The image of Varn Elric's dossier blinked on the recessed floor projection. Last known location, clearance level, Family node data. All static now. Rask stepped forward. His tone was level, but his hands had curled into fists. We are no longer discussing a breach. We are dealing with Empire-level predation. They won't invade in armor. They'll starve our colonies, collapse our logistics, split our allegiances. Halvek gave a slow nod. We invoke Protocol Radiant. The motion was passed without vote. None were needed. Atop Sykar Prime's inner citadel, Vizier Krenthar entered the Emperor's chamber. The floors gleamed obsidian black, every footstep reflecting twice beneath. A wall-length display tracked the destabilization forecasts of human frontier territories. Emperor Tsalvar, seated beneath a lattice of psionic amplifiers, regarded the display with disinterest. How many cycles before Earth begins collapsing inward? 3, if the virus paths maintain momentum. We've destabilized 2 of their relay colonies already. Their food distribution chains will segment next, Krenthar answered, voice calm. And the corpse? Returned. They'll be too wounded to respond, and too bound by conscience to retaliate. Avar tilted his head. They are clever, but predictable. It's always the flaw of the adaptable. They think time is on their side. Krenthar's lips twitched. We're not taking their world, only their momentum. But beneath Sykar's outer moons, deep within Terran Astra observatories, newly diverted signals were already drawing patterns. The capsule had not been incinerated. Its contents were being reassembled, analyzed, recalibrated. This is an SOS update. All damaged, cleared. Colonel, Field Marine. Either help or kill. Earth calculated. And in the colony of Arendor, where ration lines were already curling around blackout shelters, a child watched as a power relay flickered 3 times, then stopped. Ferric Corin closed the relay chamber with a soft click. They've begun, he muttered to himself, wiping grit from his fingers. His eyes didn't waver. From Earth to its farthest colony, every technician, officer, and ground courier would soon be given one message. We do not retaliate with fury. We retaliate with structure. The relay on Arendor hissed once before falling dark. Ferric Corin didn't flinch. He watched the circuit stabilize, fingers still hovering over the board. No overheating, no spike. Just silence, drawn by pattern. It was working. Somewhere beyond the colony's low-hanging cloud line, Earth had already moved. Admiral Corvin Rask stared through the reinforced viewport of Orbital Strategic Layers 6. The spires of Terran High Command stretching behind him in quiet formation. The station's control floor glowed softly under grid lights. No unnecessary movement, no unnecessary speech. Operatives walked with purpose, cross-referencing data without ever leaving their lanes. Every second was purchased with restraint. Show me the model from the moment the capsule was sealed, Rask said. Dr. Halvrik Torm approached with a cylindrical core reader balanced in both hands. Its surface shimmered with faint layers of residue light, coding patterns flickering along the grooves. We didn't just extract Vaughn's thoughts, Torm said, eyes locked on the reader. We found feedback layers, embedded contradiction cycles. The Shaloth couldn't fully interpret Terran logic chains, so they built linguistic filters to approximate intent. That gap? That's our insertion point. Rask didn't blink. Are the behavioral emulation triggers stable? They easily won't notice it for at least 6 cycles, Torn replied. But when they do, the damage won't be reversible. The reader was placed gently into the data cradle. It pulsed once. Then the wall interface flared alive, not with a splash of digital light, but hard-line schematics etched in layered motion. Dominion supply chains, logistics flows, resource velocities, and fleet maintenance arcs. Dr. Torm's fingers traced a curve that had been jagged in the original Sholith overlay. His inserted thread was smooth, deceptively functional. Rask studied the deviation. "It doesn't crash the system." "No," Torm said. "It matures inside it. Like a thought, the Dominion thinks it originated." Below them, 3 levels down, a tactical subnet agent sent the first embedded package through a disguised diplomatic ping. Its transmission header mirrored one of Sycar's routine cargo confirmations. Approved by 2 Shalith signatories, unknowingly mimicked in Terran AI's learning matrix. The signal drifted into a vassal colony's supply manifest unnoticed. On IREC Station 9, a Shaleth clerk reviewing fuel loads frowned at the variance. 700 units missing. The line blinked amber. He adjusted the marker manually, assuming a data reroute error from a localized transfer hub. Minutes later, planetary tankers adjusted accordingly, only to find themselves short during orbital deployment. By that time, another relay, this time food chain calibration on QRIM 3, began offsetting rations to non-existent districts. "First infection seed deployed," confirmed the subnet agent. "No alert trip, no checksum rejections." Rask crossed the command floor without raising his voice. "Initiate stagger release across 6 outer ring worlds. Nothing inside core Dominion sectors." "Yet," Torm watched him walk. "When will they realize they're the ones destabilizing themselves?" "Ellie won't," Rask said. "They'll blame inertia, fault local governors, and by the time they search for sabotage, they'll find protocols they wrote themselves." Across the station, Sable Reach operatives reviewed maps under opaque glass domes, each dome tuned to a different Dominion protectorate. The operatives worked silently, adjusting cover identities, scheduling infiltration cycles, and updating contact dead drops. None of them knew more than their quadrant. None of them would survive exposure. But they didn't have to. In a briefing room lined with steel-fold projection surfaces, Rask spoke to 5 handlers whose real names had been deleted the moment they accepted the contract. "Your targets are Calvinhold, Rithari Drift, Dromus Breakpoint, and sectors adjacent to Shaleth fuel lattice controls. You're not there to destroy. You're there to suggest a better enemy. Stir fringe rebellion, imply off-world promises, create internal cracks. Our actual attack will always arrive where they're not looking." One of the handlers asked if they start burning their own borders. "Let them," Rask said. "The fires will keep their hands too full to strike back." Back in Torm's lab, the second-level neural strand was rendering slowly, a splice of Varn Elric's vocal syntax used during fleet simulations. The Dominion had believed they were extracting command phrase formats. In truth, they had unlocked recursive frames Earth embedded decades ago into all simulation protocols. Every command lifted from Elric carried intentional redundancies, markers Earth's cyberneticists could now track as breadcrumbs within Dominion mimic nets. "Deploying reverse infection," Torm announced. "Hijacking their predictive subroutines, they'll now simulate Terran attacks based on our fake attacks." Rask nodded once. "That's the cage." In the Dominion's secondary War Council chamber, Vizier Krenthar reviewed rising reports of logistical anomalies. The lower-ranked analysts squirmed beneath his gaze. "The Sagan line missed its drone relay refueling window," said one. "Quorum 3 has begun redistributing population resources based on false census input. Calvinhold rejected a governor's command thread as invalid origin. Savar had not been informed." "Compile them all," Krenthar said calmly. "Do not escalate. Local errors must be corrected by local means." "But Vizier, Earth is not capable of network penetration at this depth. These are system artifacts." Back on Earth Station, Dr. Torm leaned back, staring at the 3rd infection sequence spooling across an isolated Dominion war drill network. The Shalith had begun testing Earth countermeasures in simulations, using corrupted Elric templates. Within hours, half their synthetic fleet scenarios began triggering false retreats, failed synchronization of orbital descent commands, and communications hijacked by friendly fire identifiers. They're rewriting their doctrine around false data, Torn whispered. Good, Rask replied. Make it permanent. Ferric Koron's fingers reconnected the final diode in the uplink node deep beneath Arendor's crust. The relay sparked once, feeding into Earth's exogrid with barely a microsecond delay. The colony's rationing forecast appeared on his screen, 6 days behind, but now realigned. He leaned back, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. The underground chamber stank of oil-soaked filters, but the console was clean. From Sekar's core governance deck to the outermost transport loop, the Shalith Dominion had started trusting projections they hadn't built. Data they didn't write, ships they never meant to dispatch. And the man whose corpse they thought had broken Earth's spine had just become the most valuable encryption key in Earth's history. Operative Hark Veston adjusted the seal on his stolen cloak and stepped into the gravity lock of Kalor Port. His breath tightened, not from fear, but focus. The suit itched where Dominion lining met Terran skin, stitched by the hands of men he no longer worked with and voices he could never respond to. His badge, forged by Directorate Counter-Mimicry Labs, shimmered dark red under the port scanner. It passed. He didn't blink. Secondary dock clear, muttered Calderic from the calm tooth embedded behind Vessen's molar. Governor's aides are tracking 7 mercenary IDs, yours included. Feed begins in 9 seconds. Vessen gave no response. He didn't need to. A man waiting to be believed never talks first. The terminal hall stretched like a jaw about to snap. Gray paneling, overhead vents, still dripping from coolant bursts. Local Kaloran militia with patchwork rifles watching the new arrivals. Half the operatives here weren't from Earth. Most didn't even know their real mission. That was the point. Everyone wore lies, but only Vessen's team had woven the script that would rip this region apart. Governor Thalvek had been waiting for external chaos to justify deploying local authority troops. Vessen's entrance, coded under the alias Varric's Call, was delivered to his intelligence director via staged data drops 2 rotations earlier. Feeds showing Terran agents arming local miners in Kalor's lowlands and black-lagged ships escaping with arms caches, all forged, all traceable to rebel groups the Dominion already distrusted. The receptionist at the upper concourse scrolled his status once, then motioned him through. You'll be escorted to Governor's sector briefing. Your ship's lock code is now restricted. That wasn't part of the deal, Vessen replied, deadpan. Neither was arming pit gangs. Perfect. Inside the secure chamber, the artificial gravity had a 3-degree tilt, off enough to notice, not enough to complain. Governor Thalvek stood behind a rigid console, fingers tapping the edge in half-time rhythm. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Vessen's group. 8 men, every uniform mismatched, accents staggered on purpose. You're the defectors, Thalvek said flatly. We're the solution to your insurgency, Vessen answered. If you want to keep the mines operational, you'll need someone who understands Terran communication cycles. I don't need criminals who couldn't hold their own sector. Which is why we're here. You don't need friends, you need fire retrol codes we already stole. Vessen placed a palm-sized disk on the table. It blinked once, just long enough for Thalvek's systems to pull what they assumed was proof of an intercepted Terran courier burst. Embedded inside were signals crafted by Dr. Halvrik Torm's decryption unit, designed to mimic outdated encryption algorithms Earth had phased out long ago, making them appear recent but flawed. The Dominion would see threat, Earth saw narrative. Thalvek took the bait. Outside, unrest was already brewing. Kalor's outer boroughs, fed up with power shortages and redirected food supplies, had received doctored communiques from Terran sympathizers, encouraging withdrawal from Dominion influence. The authors of those communiques didn't exist. The sympathizers were Dominion loyalists, unknowingly receiving scrambled instruction sets, transcribed and inverted by Sable Reach handlers. 2 sectors over, Vessen's operative Galvin triggered a planned altercation near the water distribution hub. A Dominion tank drone rerouted itself after false fire-supporting signals arrived on its band. By the time the local garrison arrived, 5 protesters had broken bones, and one energy cell station was tagged with a Terran emblem, traced directly to a now-deceased rebel faction that Earth had never armed. Echelon 8 reports visuals of retaliation flares, came Caldrick's voice. Governor Thalvik ordered troop redirection from his inner defense grid, 12 units. Vesson smiled without warmth. Start leak 2. Time it with the next ration delay. The power of the plan wasn't in explosions or sabotage. It was doubt. Engineered betrayal, seeded into already strained systems. Dominion sectors didn't fear Earth's fleets yet. They feared the appearance that their own walls were cracking under the pressure of invisible influence. On the Dominion's central relay moon Vescari, dispatches flooded into the Strategic Response Bureau. Analysts flagged multiple incidents across different vassal territories. Falsified troop reports, altered aerial footage of supposed Earth-back bombings, intercepted messages from supposed local leaders coordinating Terran infiltration. The files matched voice patterns, image residues, even context syntax, because they were all built by Earth's war linguists using Varn Elric's extracted code filters. Governor Tralek of Drummus Breakpoint just accused Calvin Hold of collaborating with defectors, said one analyst. He's threatening transit sanctions. Another voice chimed in. Quorum 3 deployed security drones against unarmed farmers. Now local media are demanding outside arbitration. Vizier Krenthar scanned the table. Are we seeing actual Terran engagement? Not once. These are all internal data-sourced events. Krenthar's fingers flexed along the console edge. That makes it worse. Back on Kalor, riots flared in District 4. 3 Dominion towers blacked out from sabotage attributed to power strikes. But in reality, they'd been turned off remotely by Dominion's own algorithm, following Vesson's broadcast of a counterfeit override signal. The override bore the encryption stamp of Earth's Colonial Auxiliary Authority, an agency that, inside a subterranean command node, Vesson crouched beside a flickering console as Galvin finished rerouting another emergency response channel. Thalvik's pulling more troops from the core. We just triggered his command reserve failsafe, Galvin said, breath quick, eyes gleaming from sweat. Tell our Kyloran friend it's time for him to vanish. He's done playing rebel. In the sewer underpass, a man wrapped in Kyloran garb fled a pre-staged explosion. Detonation effects designed to wound but not kill. Drones recorded his escape, broadcasted it across Dominion news feeds, tagging him as the Terran-bagged orchestrator of the civil collapse. His body would be found later, too burned for full verification. On the outer ring of Erindor, Admiral Rask watched the Kyloran feeds with surgical calm. Each broadcast, each report, each satellite-flared reaction, they fed directly into the Terran Command predictive archive. Dominion stretching, Torm observed beside him. They'll pull their Imperial Guard next. Rask's reply was cold and quiet. And when they do, we'll take their spine. Barrick Corrin squatted beside the stone wall, fingers blackened with lubricant, wrist pulsing from the tension of the torque wrench. He tapped the insulated relay with the back of a spanner, listening for the ping that told him the line hadn't fractured again. It answered with a dull thud. Dead, still. Cut the current, he barked, sweat rolling from his brow into his shirt collar. Reset the junction at node 3, before we lose voltage through the south tunnel again. His eldest boy, Terran, crouched in the shadows by the switch panel, boots planted on the rusted floor plate. He didn't hesitate. Locked, cycling in 3 seconds. The lights flickered. The relay box hissed, then pulsed green. Ferret exhaled hard and dragged a knuckle across his face. The underground smelled of oil residue and warm insulation foam, tinged with the sharp sting of dust disturbed by movement. Somewhere above them, the ration sirens had started again. 3 long pulses, followed by a crackling command in Shalith cadence to cease unauthorized activity. He ignored it. The old comm lines had been abandoned after the Dominion seized control of Erindor's distribution network. Civilian access to transmitters was banned. Everything had been rerouted through Shaleth enforcement towers installed atop the Capitol Ridge. Tall, pale gray structures with rotating surveillance nodes and internal scramblers. Any unauthorized signal was flagged, triangulated, then silenced. Publicly if possible. Ferric didn't broadcast, he rerouted. The cables beneath Arendor's colony crust were older than his memory. They weren't supposed to work anymore, but Earth's original colonists had reinforced the tunnels with redundant lattice nodes. Failsafes, never documented on any Dominion data slate. That made Ferric the last living man who understood the line schematics firsthand. "Pass the frequency key," he muttered. Terran pulled a flat casered chip from his belt pouch, handing it over. The strip was thin as paper, embedded with firmware that Earth's directorate had compressed from original defense modules and smuggled in through diplomatic cargo shells before the seizure. Ferric slotted it into the relay node. The signal returned. 72 seconds of clear band access, that's all we get, Ferric warned. More than that and we light up every sensor they've got within 5 kilometers. Across the chamber, his youngest, Diran, pried open the bottom of a ration crate. His fingers worked fast, palms slick. He slid a microchip packet, smaller than his thumbnail, into the foam liner, then pressed the panel shut again. No sound, no shift. From the outside, it looked untouched. 8 crates tagged, Diran said. Delivery route runs through the West Guard. Less scanning. Then that's where they go, Ferric replied. These code strips were no mere comm tags. They carried routing algorithms disguised as nutritional data. When scanned by Shaleth handlers, the processors would trigger Dominion AI to reroute supply inventory files toward ghost colonies Earth had long since abandoned. It would look like clerical errors. Arendor's food reserves would rise by mistake, while across the system, vassal colonies under Shaleth Dominion would be flagged for underperformance. Diran sealed the crate lids and stamped the manifests. "You think they'll notice the extra rations here? Anybody won't even see them. Their numbers will look fine. The shortage will land on someone else's ledger." Above ground, the street-level conditions had worsened. Long lines of colonists stood under heat lamps powered just enough to simulate compliance. The sun hung low over the ridge, casting long shadows across cracked concrete. Shalioth patrols moved in squads, rifles always drawn but rarely fired. Their drones hovered without purpose, watching, recording, and missing everything that mattered. One of the drones passed directly over the Corin household. From inside the roof gutter, a pair of optical jammers, built from dismantled comm parts and kitchen processors, scrambled the scanning frequencies just long enough to blind the drone as it passed over. Ferric slid open the underground hatch, emerging into the garage. His shoulders cracked as he stood upright, hands raw from the subterranean work. His wife was long gone, lost during the first fuel restriction wave, but he hadn't let the house rot. Every panel, every fixture had a purpose now. He turned to his sons. "Rask's waiting. Once the uplink opens, we have 25 seconds to send our next sequence." The boys didn't ask questions. They'd memorized the procedure like scripture. Ferric crossed into the comm room, a makeshift station built inside a former utility closet. The core box was hardwired through reinforced conduit into the relay they'd reactivated beneath the southern tram line. The interface was analog. Dials, toggles, a pulsar that clicked when frequency alignment locked. Earth had sent him new encryption packets once per rotation via ground runners. This one bore the red band. He activated the link. "Uplink stabilized, routing through Echo Path 7, he said. Static at first, then a click. A voice, filtered and clear. Aldor confirmed. "Patch received. Routing to net spine." Earth was listening. By now, the Shalith command grid had lost all telemetry from Arendor. Their drones still flew, their scans still ran, but none of their data reached Sykar Prime. Every report from the colony flowed instead through Terran command filters built beneath Ferric's garage, forged in signals no Dominion algorithm could parse. The entire colony had become a black node, broadcasting, storing, and redirecting Terran's strategic movement like a buried transmitter. Terran watched the screen blink. "Transmission complete. They've got our list of depot schedules and patrol timings. Rask will use it." Ferric leaned back, eyes glassy. "He already has." On Sykar Prime, the Dominion analysts began noting inconsistencies. Erindor reports ceased arriving. Governors nearby attempted to raise comms. Nothing. Shalif surveillance grids began escalating diagnostics. They'd see flickers. Old data looping in ways that didn't make sense. Numbers repeating when they shouldn't. Resources appearing before they were requested. It would look like corruption. It wasn't. Earth had turned Erindor into a command proxy without ever launching a weapon. Farage hadn't fired a shot, but he had opened every door that needed unlocking. When he stepped outside that evening, the sky held the dim streaks of incoming Dominion patrol transports. Too late. The food crates were already gone. The kids had delivered them 2 hours earlier. And under his breath, without pride or noise, Ferric Kurin whispered, "You're already inside." Dr. Halvrik Torm pulled the lead-lean neural chip from its containment drawer and placed it into the suspension socket with both hands gloved. The panel clicked closed, isolating the fragment in a carbon-shielded interface ring. 6 different cooling tubes hissed as the microcurrent buffer engaged. The chamber dropped 5 degrees within seconds. "Load his cognitive map. No compression this time," Torm ordered. Behind him, 3 technicians monitored the signal resonance, their hands hovering over circuit stabilizers. The neural residue still responded, flickering on the neural lattice as if searching for a synapse that no longer existed. It wasn't memory they were tracking, it was instinct. The leftover pattern recognition from Lieutenant Varn Elric's cerebrum was now the backbone of an artificial perception worm. From the tactical dais above them, Admiral Rask watched through reinforced glass, arms locked behind his back. His face showed no anticipation, only calculation. Operation Kestrel hadn't launched yet. First, they needed access. Not into systems, but into behavior. The interface came alive, threads of mirrored logic crawling across the containment window. The Trojan wasn't active malware. It didn't destroy anything. It embedded contradiction, lacing information with decision branches that bent reality inward. Dominion systems would act on it the same way muscles respond to incorrect nerve commands. Torm leaned over the console, inputting the last command line manually. "This is not a brute force vector. We're disguising invasion as familiar protocol." Rask didn't look away. "Feed it through Vorin's command chain. Choose the node handling fleet dispersals, not civilian logistics. If they think it's a redistribution bug, they'll lock the wrong doors." The transmission relay flicked green. The signal exited Earth's orbital core and passed into the core line compression array, where Sable Reach had already planted mimic Dominion packet wrappers. By the time the Cherini reached the Vorin datasphere, it carried a Dominion timestamp from 5 years prior. Signed off by a governor long dead, whose security credentials had been harvested from archived comm debris floating over Quorum 3. Inside Vorin's red data core, a geothermal sealed citadel beneath a glacier belt, the Trojan didn't trip alarms. It folded itself into a known data structure and crawled forward like a forgotten command waiting to be reactivated. Dominion AI registered it as outdated and inert. Then the timestamp triggered. 32 logic trees collapsed. Fleet directives reprioritized. Supply lanes redirected to no longer active systems. Diplomatic communication scripts inverted, making threat acknowledgements sound like territorial surrenders. And buried deep beneath operational logs, video archives began dumping into public access layers. Within minutes, Vorin's second-tier diagnostic processors detected a corruption spike. Emergency suppression protocols kicked in. But the files were already flowing, packaged into fragments, disguised as system updates, and beaming into civilian infrastructure nodes on dozens of planets. Rask turned toward the data analyst station. "Where's the first breach showing?" The lead analyst answered without hesitation. "Erindor, broadcasting through unsecured Dominion relay towers in sync with internal loops." Ferric Quarren's garage station lit up without warning. The display, typically inert until Terran Command issued routing packets, flashed with Dominion footage. Raw, unedited, unfiltered. A comm array pulsed red once, then steadied. Darren, startled, dropped the crate lid in his lap. "What is this?" Terran leaned over his shoulder. The footage showed grainy overhead shots. Civilians executed at Sorn Prime, archival logs of forced sterilization programs in Calvan Hold, unmarked transports dumping bodies into geologic trenches. Every file carried the seal of the Shaleth Dominion's Judicial Enforcement Directive. Ferric stepped into the room, face hardening. They tried to scrub these records, but Varn saw them first. The screen began repeating a broadcast cycle every 23 seconds. Enough to stay beneath Shaleth comm-metering thresholds, not enough to trigger a system reset. Arendor's old municipal antenna flared to life, flooding surrounding colonies with the footage before Dominion core protocols could quarantine the loop. On Sykar Prime, panic surged through the War Council's upper ranks. Vizier Krenthar stared at a frozen frame of a detention purge, tipstoned, authenticated, and signed by a current commander still in power. "Where did this footage originate?" he barked. "The Reen's vault," an aide stammered. "Not from external contact. It was triggered internally." Another screen lit up. Kalor's mining district, now in full riot. Protesters armed with blunt tools, banners stenciled with the Earth Directorate emblem, an emblem they had never seen before this morning, stormed a distribution tower. Dominion Guard opened fire. Civilian casualties streamed live across outer network channels. Earth never even accessed directly. "They think we leaked this," the aide whispered. Krenthar didn't respond, his jaw clenched. Back on Earth's command station, Dr. Torm monitored the spread across Terran screens. 74 colonies receiving, 39 confirmed rebroadcasts, 14 intercepted by Dominion firewalls, 2 quarantined by internal descent channels. But the damage is already embedded. "Highlight the Voreen signatures in every frame," Rask said. "Let their public know these were recorded by their own security forces." Within hours, 3 planetary governors declared emergency secession from Dominion hierarchy. Dominion's legal response units attempted to suppress transmissions using orbital signal suppressors, but the Trojan had already infected override commands on every Tier 1 system connected to Voreen. Every attempt at censorship appeared to reinforce the authenticity of the leak. And on Arendor, Farik Korin mounted a mobile broadcast unit onto the colony's water tower, plugging the signal port directly into a repurposed weather node. The projection lit the sky. Looped footage burned into view, casting red flashes across the settlement below. "It's not ours anymore," Darren said, watching from the roof's edge. "No," Ferric muttered. "It never was." Inside Dominion borders, the public narrative fractured. The Shaleth lost control not just of systems or soldiers, but of meaning. Their citizens weren't retreating in fear. They were questioning purpose, asking if the war was defensive or predatory, wondering what else had been erased. Rask reviewed the summary on a printed sheet of fiber-stiffened carbon leaf. He didn't rely on screens for data he intended to remember. "We gave them truth," he said. Torm sat in silence, watching the Varn core slow its flicker in the containment unit. The imprint had begun dimming now. Its function was complete. Fleet Officer Tavik Dren narrowed his gaze at the navigational layer stretched across the command deck's projection arc. There were no movement signals, no threat indicators. That was intentional. He tapped twice on the control bar, locking the Wraith's position beneath a rotating ice cluster the size of a city block. The debris fields in the Garrus belt did more than conceal. They absorbed heat signatures and scattered sensor pings into noise. "Status on clamp grids?" Dren asked without turning. His second-in-command, Vaylor Jern, responded while adjusting the calibration filters. "Grid nests 2 through 7 are locked. 8's finalizing. Latency dropped under threshold. Trigger is tethered." "Good. That flagship's blind within 3 minutes of entry." Outside the Wraith's reinforced hull, the field of rock and wreck drifted with deceptive calm. 37 Terran dreadnoughts floated with zero propulsion, tucked behind frozen debris, power arrays reduced to trace resonance. Each was slaved into a staggered mesh. The moment one activated, all would awaken. Dominion fleet signals entered the periphery of the system 30 minutes earlier. Their path was predictable. Sakar's command had traced the Vorine breach back to this quadrant, interpreting the chaos as Earth's doing. Now they sent a retaliatory formation. Heavy carriers, signal jammers, and a command ship, the obedience of fate. Inside the Wraith, the air held a taut chill. Every crew member stood ready without word. They weren't trained for confrontation. They were bred for management of consequence. Obedience is shifting course, Jern reported. Linear path, no flanks. They think they're imposing. Dren's fingers curled around the deployment rail. They're walking into sculpture. 3 drones, each modified with signal reflection plates, flew outward and began feeding back faint comm markers, designed to mimic the distortion of fleeing Terran ships. Dominion scanners would catch the movement. They'd believe the rebels were routed and in full escape. The bait worked. The Obedient adjusted its trajectory, pulling its escort ships tighter and lowering shielding to prepare for mass arrest procedures. That was the cue. Trigger clamps, Dran said. 7 command officers moved at once. Far beneath the drifting asteroid strata, buried grav clamp arrays engaged. Electromagnetic anchors, tethered weeks earlier into dormant stone, activated simultaneously. The Dominion flagship seized in place, its hull locked from movement. Every circuit feeding its stabilizers rerouted through Terran logic intercepts. Target immobile, Jern confirmed. Failsafe still engaged, but their backup core hasn't realigned. 3 seconds until logic probe deployment. Jern didn't flinch. Send the virus. A logic spike burst from a shielded pod inside the Wraith. It entered through Dominion escort chatter, piggybacking on routine signal acknowledgement. Once inside the Obedience's systems, it activated passive loops taken from Varnelric's mimicked neural syntax. Dominion protocols accepted the command paths automatically, then looped into standstill. On board the Dominion command ship, Admiral Karsheth slammed a fist against the console as lights flickered across navigation bays. His staff screamed status reports. The ship was deadlocked. Even the fallback thrusters wouldn't cycle. "What is this? Where are the Terrans?" he demanded. But there were no visuals. The asteroid field kept Terran vessels fully obscured. The ambush wasn't a show of might. It was structure without sound. By the time Karsheth's sensors picked up the Terran ships, the Wraith had already docked its containment pod to the Obedience's undercarriage. "Boarding sequence green," Jern stated. "We'll extract only command crew, no secondaries, no fatalities." Inside the docking bay, a Terran infiltration unit exited without word. Clad in thermal-dampened suits, they moved with exact steps. The breach door opened silently. The Dominion bridge crew didn't resist. They weren't disabled. They were paralyzed by their own systems. Back on the Wraith's bridge, Dren logged the engagement start time, 0:01 and 18 seconds. The Dominion officers were cuffed, blindfolded, and transferred without confrontation. No declarations were made. The boarding squad retreated with clinical efficiency, sealing the Obedience's bridge with a delay lock encryption virus that would prevent its reactivation for the next 20 hours. As the Wraith undocked, the rest of the Terran dreadnoughts emerged from behind the debris ring, visible now through narrow triangulation. Each rotated slowly into alignment. None fired. Dren watched the formation solidify around the immobile Dominion fleet. "Transmit the message," he said. The signal played once, unencrypted. This engagement lasted 12 minutes. No shots were fired, no vessels destroyed. "This is restraint." Seconds later, the Wraith activated retreat cycle and slipped behind the asteroid field again, its signature suppressed within 3 drift intervals. The Dominion ships remained immobile, partly from shock, partly from systemic paralysis. Back on Sykar Prime, the footage reached the council chamber within 2 hours. Vizier Krenthar reviewed it without expression. The timestamp at the end of the feed, 12:00 and 57 seconds, blinked once before freezing. Emperor Saver turned from the projection screen. They didn't claim territory. They didn't kill officers. They just stopped movement. Krenthar didn't answer. A final image displayed at the close of the feed. The detained command crew of the Obedience of Fate, seated blindfolded aboard the Wraith, untouched, cuffed with padded restraint bands, their names logged beside them. They were returned to Sci-Fi via automated cruiser 12 hours later, and with them came a hard copy engagement log, inked, unsigned, and stamped in Terran red. No threats, no commentary, only the timestamp. Tavik Dren reviewed the post-op with Jern in the Wraith's strategy bay. The debrief was quiet, uninterrupted. No medals were awarded, no names were entered into records. "This won't scare them," Jern said at last. Dren replied without inflection. "It's not meant to scare. It's meant to remind them they're not in control." Commander Solvek Mar stepped into the primary transmission vault beneath Sekar Prime's defense rotunda, his boots scraping across the marbleized synth stone, as two aides followed behind, each gripping a terminal pad like it might bite. The lights above them dimmed unexpectedly, then adjusted, failing to stabilize. "Why's the synchronization grid cycling?" Mar asked without slowing. "No cause detected," one of the aides muttered, "but Command Layer 6 is showing divergent orders on the Quorum line. They're transmitting a system-wide ceasefire at the same time Sector 3 just authorized orbital purging." Mar stopped, turned, and stared at the younger officer. "Which one did you send?" "Neither, sir. They came in pre-coded." The vault doors slid apart, revealing a circular comm array still operational. Barely. The left quadrant's holo-emitter stuttered, breaking the projected image of Dominion fleet disposition into fragments. The ships blinked, vanished, returned, then displayed markings unfamiliar to any Dominion registry. "Those aren't ours," Mark said. "No, sir. They're not Terran either." He crossed to the control panel and scrolled through the fleet command threads. The header tags were correct. Proper seals, correct formatting, expected origin points, but the embedded logic sequences had all been rerouted through anomaly relay routes. When he tapped to verify one, it bounced to an encryption protocol dated 3 cycles out of sync. "They're building decisions off false data," Mar said. "Our fleets are deploying where they think Earth is, not where they are." On the screen, a forward garrison in Dramas Breakpoint reported full withdrawal of local security forces, citing a Dominion override to defensive posture. The override matched none of the encryption keys Mar had issued. At the same time, a separate command node flagged the withdrawal as insubordination and deployed surveillance drones to intercept the same officers who had just followed what they believed were official orders. Mar turned to his aide. "Get me reinforcement reports from Calvinhold. I want to know which divisions reached them." The officer looked at his pad. They received nothing. They were expecting 34 carriers. Instead, they got a single survey vessel rerouted from Vassal Reclamation. It didn't even have ground support. Mar didn't speak. He walked to the second terminal, accessed internal node activity logs, and traced 36 fleet orders. Every last one terminated in a redirect command that shouldn't have existed. The target location for half of them was blank. The rest pointed to defunct staging platforms destroyed during the Rhyhall campaign a generation ago. Above Sekar Prime, 4 orbital satellites flashed blue, then abruptly went dark. Mar saw the signal jump on his feed, every unit simultaneously dropping from the network's mesh without a breach alert. That wasn't a strike. That was a command-level blackout. "Who authorized a satellite test?" "Sir," the technician said, hand trembling slightly. "Those weren't tests." "eBay were detonated?" "No, Commander. They were overridden." In the garrison's upper tower, a symbol flickered across the external diagnostic screen. A countdown clock. 42 minutes. No indicator of what it referenced, just the time. Below it, the Dominion crest inverted itself. Visually altered, still bearing official formatting but marked in red. Every support officer in the command chamber went quiet. The ticking numbers displayed above each security panel, each status board, each verification pad. Mar looked up. "Has the Emperor been informed?" The answer was slow. "The palace comms are dark." "Relay nodes were confirmed functional this morning." "Then they're no longer ours." In another sector, one of the defense stations deployed an automated perimeter net, only for the targeting system to mistake its own vessels as threats. Mar received an emergency report detailing 3 friendly fire incidents across 2 hemispheres. In each case, the Dominion units had been pinged by threat recognition software, seeded with Terran logic distortions mimicking internal codes. The system had flagged Dominion vessels as falsified Terran vessels, triggering self-defense subroutines they couldn't disable in time. Below the tower, inside the base armory, 3 anti-air platforms powered down simultaneously. Mar sent a direct command to restart them. The confirmation came through. The systems did not respond. He descended the staircase and entered the core floor manually. Each console returned his authorization, greenlit, acknowledged the command, and did nothing. The signals weren't being rejected, they were being ignored. The Dominion's infrastructure hadn't been destroyed, it had been reprogrammed to play a different game. At the outer ring garrison of Veshtari, incoming Dominion warships received altered docking signals that redirected them toward a civilian transport station, under the assumption it had been repurposed for fleet housing. The station's guidance locks engaged. 2 of the larger carriers tore open sections of the structure, attempting to stabilize, killing over 300. That footage streamed directly to Sycar's incident log, encoded with a Dominion timestamp that had never passed through any oversight layer. Mar reviewed the emergency brief and spoke without emotion. "We're folding from the inside." A voice crackled from the side channel. It was Governor Tralek of Dromus Breakpoint. "Our supply drops were misrouted. Our garrison is down to 5% rations. And now I'm being told I sent my own citizens to a labor station that no longer exists. I didn't authorize that. I didn't even write the damn code." Mar stared at the data strip. "Neither did I." Tralek's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "Is this Earth?" "It's not Earth," Mar said. "It's Varn." Above them, another satellite pulsed briefly, then blinked out. Mar tracked the echo. There was no attack vector, no impact debris, just absence. The kind of disappearance that suggested it had removed itself. He saw a new pattern scrolling below it. Tiny, unobtrusive, but consistent. A signature trail, not a threat, a fingerprint. They weren't just under attack, they'd been overridden. Sycar Prime's orbital path was no longer silent. The interdiction grid sealed the entire planetary shell in a spherical lock, each station synced to the others through Terran command fibers buried deep inside surrounding moons. Entry and exit were null. Every route monitored, every frequency archived. A closed loop, cold and absolute. Admiral Corvin Rask stood on Observation Deck 2 aboard the Aegis Protocol, watching the planet rotate with deliberate pace. The Shalith capital glowed beneath a layer of defunct command satellites, some still spinning without connection, others frozen with burst cores. Dozens of them had detonated after repeated system overrides failed to reconnect them to Dominion infrastructure. Behind Rask, the operations floor was quiet. No orders were pending, no vessels needed routing, no comm traffic demanded interception. The war had collapsed under its own weight days ago. He placed a hand on the mission log pad built into the guardrail and activated the final entry node. The interface recognized his biometrics and unlocked the classified ledger. 3 words marked the top of the report. Operation terminated. Controlled containment. Achieved. Civilian casualties across Dominion territory, minimal. Total system losses, 84%. Command chain obliteration, verified. Shalith central government, functionally extinct. The Dominion had not been invaded. It had been removed from relevance. He turned toward the junior officer stationed at the console adjacent to the viewframe. "Is the beacon aligned?" "Yes, Admiral. First pulse goes live in 20 seconds. Rask gave a slight nod, not of approval but confirmation. Above Varine, once a stronghold of strategic archives, now reduced to a cold shell orbiting an abandoned moon. A new satellite activated. It bore no Terran flag. No weapon system, no broadcast signal of intent. Only a single looped message, engraved across its reinforced side panels in 3 alphabets. Barn Elric, 12 minutes. Never again. The letters illuminated on a repeating cycle, triggered by Vorine's sun cresting its horizon. The signal did not announce vengeance, it recorded correction. The 12-minute timestamp referred to the exact length of the Dominion's failed counterstrike. An entire generation of supremacy undone in less time than a troop deployment briefing. Inside the black-bound logbook at Rask's side, he wrote the closing phrase manually. "We were not provoked. We were taken from." This was the answer. On Arendor, Ferric Corin stood before a crowd of 10 students inside a relay lab rebuilt from repurposed comms housing. He held a strand of worn cable in his hand, threading it slowly through a plastic sleeve while the children mirrored his actions. "This line isn't just about data," he said. "It's about integrity. It carries truth, or it carries collapse. You won't always know which until you've sent it." Terran, now 17, helped anchor the shielding conduit along the underside of the training board. His hands worked confidently, no hesitation in the bends, no sloppiness in the seals. The younger students watched, mimicking him step for step. Darren walked in late, holding a fresh printed digest compiled from the Terran broadcast vaults. It included recovered Dominion records, legal transcripts, and public testimonies from former Shalith colonies now in reconstruction. Ferric took it, flipped through the front pages, and placed it on the table beside the old power couplers. "Tomorrow we'll go through the Kalor incident files. There's a difference between rebuilding and repeating." Outside the classroom, a modular satellite dish turned to receive Terran signal pulses. None were censored. Every looped sequence remained intact, feeding reports from newly liberated colonies, trade reforms enacted under Directorate monitors, and migration shifts now stabilized under AI-supervised logistics grids. Corin watched the signal readout stabilize. His relay had become a permanent node in the Terran information lattice. No reward had been given for it, none expected. He opened the storage hatch and pulled out a faded strip of relay tape, marked with Varn Elric's identification string. It no longer transmitted, but he kept it anyway. Damaged, scorched, still legible. "You were one man," he murmured, "and they made you their blueprint. So we made you ours." On Sekar Prime, inside the collapsed remains of the former War Council chamber, the surviving governors gathered in near darkness. Dominion command infrastructure no longer responded to their inputs. Every terminal defaulted to error loops. Attempts to initiate new strategic directives returned messages with time discrepancies. The last readable message echoed across the internal display panels. "This network is no longer authorized to execute control protocols. Refer to planetary governance for civil reassessment." But no governance remained. Commander Solvek Mar sat alone in the decommissioned satellite array bunker just beyond the main city ridge. He had not left the seat since the countdown ended. He had no orders to give, no system left to command. Above him, the correction beacon completed another orbit. He watched it pass. No attempt was made to destroy it. There was nothing left to say. From orbit, the Terran Directorate activated the last phase of containment, non-engagement lockdown. No vessels, no negotiations, no reparations. Sekar would be left to stagnate, encased in a dome of global memory. The former empire was not erased. It was preserved as evidence. Admiral Rask recorded one final statement into the Directorate archive. "The Shalith once took a single man, without cause, without consideration. They dismantled him for advantage. And what followed was not war. What followed was consequence. This will be the last time Earth corrects a theft like this, because next time, there will be nothing left to return." Back on Arendor, the children finished their relay work. The final cable segment clicked into place. Ferric powered up the board. All lights turned green, no corrections needed. He nodded once and said, "That's what it means to send a clean signal." If this story hit you, drop a comment and let me know what moment got you the most. I'd love to hear what stood out, and if you want more stories where humanity pushes back hard, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.